Oh yeah, first I'll start with some quick disclaimers. I'm only gonna be ranking these switches stock because it's way too much work to lube all of these switches, and lubing can like have variations in the switches depending on who's lubing and things like that. Second, I only judged it based on just one switch on like the acrylic base, and if it was like a sound testing, I always make sure to use the same slot on the acrylic tester here, because the different slot does actually affect the sound. It's just like a keyboard would. So only one of each. It's not like a full keyboard typing experience or anything like that. Alpacas, right off the bat for me, are just S tier. These are like basically like I would say your gold standard JWK linear switch. They're super smooth and they sound a bit clacky for me, but that's fine just because the smoothness is like makes up for it. You can't really hear any like scratchiness. There's basically no stem wobble. They're cheap at about 55 cents a switch, and the stock springs are I believe 62 grams, which are actually like a bit too light for me, but you can always like swing swap it considering how cheap alpacas are. So the Hyperglide are basically like a remold of Cherry Blacks. The goal is to like get that vintage Cherry Blacks feeling, and I really just put these as C tier. I guess for one, I'm not really a total fan of Cherry Blacks just because I find the stock spring to be too heavy. But it does have like that cherry switch sound, which is, if that's what you're going for, that's just really the only switches that you can really get. That's mostly why I give it C tier. I mean, it's about 50 to 60 cents a switch, so it's about the price of a JWK linear. So pricing wise is not bad, but the stock spring weight is just too heavy for me, and I just find like the switches like the alpacas are just to be smoother. Sound is definitely an A. I agree on blacks. They sound pretty good. Overall, I'll put Hyperglide Black C tier, but if you really want that cherry sound, that's the only way you're gonna get it. They have a very different sound from like JWK linears. Oh, actually, no. Here's another one of my favorites. Gateron Yellows, the KS3 version. So the milky tops and like the black bottoms. These are S tiers because one, they're 24 cents a switch. Like they're basically the cheapest switch around that you can get. They're the hands down the best budget option. Stock, they're not the smoothest. Like the alpacas are definitely smoother, but you know at this price point, at like 2 Gateron Yellows for 1 alpaca, that makes an S tier for me. And you can also go ahead and just lube them up if you really want that smoothness. I think of Gateron Yellows as a easy budget switch for like maybe you have like a really cheap hot swap build, or maybe you bought a pre-build that comes with Gateron Yellows. They work fine there. Or maybe you have like a mid-tier build like let's say like a $300, $200 top mounted 65%. If you just lube these Gateron Yellows, they'll do just fine there. But I do feel like after you get to like 400 plus for like a custom build for just a case, that's when you probably will just go for JWK linears. But yeah, I think Gateron Yellows are a great budget to like mid-tier custom keyboard option for a switch. I am gonna go and talk about marshmallows. These are also S tier for me. I'm gonna get the S tiers out of the way. These are my 3 S tiers, and if I were to rank the S tiers, I would probably put marshmallows first, alpaca second, and then Gateron Yellows third. Gateron Yellow spring thoughts. Yeah, okay. Sorry, good point. I forgot to mention, I really like the stock Gateron Yellow springs. They're about like 62, 63 grams bottom out or something like that, but there are longer springs. So the reason why the alpaca's 62 gram springs are too light for me is because they're like the standard 14 millimeter, and with the Gateron Yellow's longer spring kind of causing that slow curve spring effect, which even if you don't know anything about springs, go watch my videos on like aftermarket springs. Having that longer spring causes more of a preload, so that my hands or my fingers don't accidentally just activate a switch when I'm just resting on top, because there's a higher initial force. So I really like the stock Gateron Yellow springs overall. So with marshmallows are S tier for me because one, they're the same price as alpacas at 55 cents a switch. However, they are really hard to get now just because the original like group buy is already over. And I think here's a little secret, which maybe I don't want to tell you guys because I still want to buy more marshmallow switches. But 3D Cubes is supposed to be getting more marshmallow switches in stock from Thicklock, the original vendor for marshmallows, but I don't really know when that's happening because I'm guessing like COVID has caused a bunch of like shipping troubles and stuff like that. So I'm not sure when they're getting them, but whenever 3D Cubes get marshmallows in stock, I'm definitely gonna buy more of these because I really like these marshmallow switches. So they're about 55 cents a switch, so they're like in that really like nice price tier. They're really smooth. I believe they were the first V2JWK linears, so super smooth. But really the most unique thing about them is that they come with a progressive 68 gram spring. And there's really I don't think there's like any switches out there, maybe like one or two now, that you can buy that comes with a progressive spring. So a progressive spring, what it does is that there is a lighter initial force down, but then as you keep bottoming out, it starts to get heavier to push down, and it can help with like not bottoming out, but I still bottom out. I feel like most people do, but having it go from light to heavy gives the spring like this nice like bouncy feel to it when you type. So it makes a linear switch go from something just super boring to something that's a little bit more interesting. And that's why I really like the Switch. And overall, I just like the stock sound over the alpacas because the marshmallow stock sound is a bit deeper. Okay, I'm gonna go with silent alpacas, which is this one. Silent alpacas I'm putting as A tier. Like the alpacas in the S tier, the stock spring's a bit too light for me at 62 grams. But I will say they are probably one of the best silent linear switch that you can buy right now at 70 cents a switch. You honestly don't have like too many options when it comes to a silent linear switch. But I'm ranking alpacas as the top one here. They're essentially, alpacas, but silent. I really don't, there's not much I'll say about it other than they're a bit more expensive just due to like the rubber that you need to put on the stem to make it silent. And I'm just gonna put it as A tier because silent switches for me are like, I don't know why I feel like silent switches aren't a thing where you want to use them for the most part. It's because you have to use them, whether you're working in an office or maybe you don't want to have the sound go through the microphone when you're playing games or recording or whatever. So that's why I'm putting them as A tier. Novelty creams, I will say I'm gonna say C tier for now. Depending on how the rest of the list pans out, I may move things around just because my notes are all messed up now. But I'm putting creams as C tier just because, one, they are very scratchy stock. And I think everyone knows this, right? People are always like, oh, you gotta like break these switches in to like get the full value of them. I'm not gonna spend the time to break a switch in. Are you kidding me? That's so much work. Like, it's kind of like how I was playing Xenoblade 2 on the Switch, and after like 5 or 10 hours, I just couldn't get into Xenoblade. And I was like reading so many things online where people were like, oh, you gotta keep playing Xenoblade, and it gets so much better in like 20-30 hours in. But like, I'm not gonna suffer for 20 or 30 hours just so I might like this game. Which is the same thing with creams. Everyone buy creams because they are one of the thockiest linears available. So if you really want that thock cream signature sound and you're willing to like make that sacrifice of either breaking in the switch or just lubing them and then just keeping them as like not the smoothest lube switch, but they're still pretty smooth, then sure. But I'm not gonna go for that. For me, that's why for me it's a C tier. I might move it down to a D tier. We'll see. I honestly don't remember wait, let me check my list real quick. What other switches are in here that I might have a D tier? I'm gonna put them a D tier for now. D tier. Put Helios as D tier because they're $1.2 a switch. For a 60% keyboard, that's like $65 on just switches. For one, they're expensive. I do not like Zeal switches based on the price alone. I'm not paying that much for a switch. They are smooth. Don't get me wrong, they are very smooth. But so the Helios is the silent linear switch, right? So they're competing against alpacas. I'd rather just get alpacas. I find the rubber on the Helios to be stiffer, but not as stiff as the black silent ink. So in terms of like rubber stiffness for silent switches, alpaca's the softest, then Helios, and then silent black inks. They're smooth. The rubber is like medium firmness, and oh, the biggest reason why, when I was like doing a sound test on these, you can really hear the leaf ping on these switches. I don't know what's gonna come out. I had to like really do this to hear them like clearly, but like there is definitely some leaf ping on the Helios, and on a silent switch that's definitely not great. So I'm giving these a D tier. Tangerines I am putting as A tier. I'll put them past the silent alpacas. There's really not much you can say about tangerines other than they're a really solid switch. I mean, they were a super hype linear switch. They're priced really well at 65¢ a switch. They're smooth, there's no stem wobble. The only reason why they're A tier and why alpacas are S tier is because alpacas are 10¢ cheaper. But you can't go wrong with either alpacas or tangerine. So yeah. Let's go back to the banana split. I'm gonna put these at B tier. Banana split are basically the same as tangerines. They're like recolored. I don't think there was really anything different. Maybe the housing got different. What else is my note here? Apparently, I thought that the banana split were basically the same as tangerines, but the sound was a bit higher pitched. So I don't have much to say other than I guess they're B tier. They're whatever. There's nothing special about them, so B tier. Let's go ahead and do get around black inks. I'm gonna put black inks as I'm trying to balance out this tier list at least a little bit. I'm gonna put them as I kind of want to put them at B. I'm gonna put them at B for now. You know, everyone really liked black inks, and for good reason, because they have a pretty nice sound signature to them. But for me, the reason why they're a B tier stock, by the way, stock, is because one, the stock spring is too heavy for me. They're like bottom out at 70 grams. That's after a while, it just makes my finger just fatigued. So I don't like that. And I apparently have some weird leaf noise with my black ink, which is interesting. These are the V2s. I'm not sure if y'all have any issues with your black inks making weird leaf noises. At least on the one I got some weird leaf noises. So putting them as B tier, but they are a favorite of a lot of people. I mean, they're a solid switch for the most part, and they're not really that expensive at 75¢ switch. Likewise, let's go with silent black inks. I'm gonna put these as B tier as well. As a silent switch, so alpaca's silent linear for me is the best. A, I'll put the silent inks at B. No, actually, I'm gonna put them at C tier. I'm gonna put these at C tier just because I just think the alpacas are just so much better. So the Gateron silent black ink, again, heavy stock spring for me. Of course, you can always swap out the springs, but no, that I'm just judging all these stock just for some kind of comparison. The rubber is the stiffest of the Helios and alpacas, and I don't really like the super stiff rubber on them. They are a deeper sounding silent switch, if that makes sense, because they're silent, but how can they be deeper? They just sound deeper. I don't know. Oh, also on the upstroke on these silent black inks, I heard vibrations. Like it was kind of odd. Maybe it was due to the stiff rubber, but when on the upstroke, it sounds like the housing just like starts vibrating, and I didn't really like that. So that's why I'm putting them as C tier. I have NOS black. So NOS is new old stock cherry blacks, and I'm gonna put these as D tier. I'm not sure if this is like a hot take or anything, because I feel like NOS black inks are some kind of like weird cult favorite. Now they're like, I'm not sure how much people are charging for NOS black inks, maybe like 150, 120 or something like that. So they're expensive, and I just don't see much reason to buy them especially since now you can buy Hyperglide black ink, sorry, Hyperglide cherry blacks, which in my opinion, when I was testing out my Hyperglide and my NOS black cherry black, they felt the same. They felt essentially the same to me. So you might as well just get the Hyperglides instead of the NOS. So D tier at the very last spot. Helios, I'm gonna put Helios as C tier just because, again, they're expensive. They're over $1 a switch, but they're smooth, but they're C tier. I guess this is just me just hanging on Teal Switches, unfortunately. And then let's see, Everglides. This is the Everglide Tourmaline V2.5 or something. I don't even know where this switch came from. It just came with the switch tester. I don't even know where you can buy these things right now. I'm redoing my list. I'm putting these as C tier. I'm putting Cherry. Oh wait, hold on. I think this is the Cherry. I think this is the Garon Black Ink, and this is a Silent. Okay, I'm gonna do it something like that. So with the Everglides V2.5s, nothing stood out to me. They're a linear switch. And they're a bit on the expensive side. I think they were like 90 cents a switch, so nothing really stood out for me when I tried these, so they're C tier. Let's go ahead and run through this linear tier list real quick. So S tier, we have Marshmallows taking the top spot, then Alpacas V2s, then Garon Yellows, then A tier with Tangerines and Silent Alpacas. B tier, we have Banana Split, followed by Garon Black Inks. C tier, we have Hyperglides, Cherry Blacks, followed by the Garon's Black Silent Inks, followed by these Everglide V2.5 thingy, and then we have the Helios taking the last spot at C tier. And for D tier, we have Creams, we have Helios, and then we have NOS Vintage Blacks. Alas, I don't know. D tier. These are silent tactile switches. They're a very light tactile switch. They're basically almost a linear D tier. That's all I can say. They're just not that great. You know what? Let's get some of my favorite tactile switches just right out of the way. Boba U4 and U4, or sorry, this is the Boba U4 and this is the Boba U4T. Both S tier for me. If you watch my short on the Bobas, you know how much I love these switches, and I still stand by them. I think these are hands down the best stock tactile switches that you can buy right now. The Boba, I'll talk about the U4Ts. Actually, I'll put U4T first because silent switches are like not the greatest sometimes, but I would say I do like the U4s. The Boba U4Ts are great D-shaped tactile bump. I really like the D-shaped tactile bumps rather than the sharper P shapes like the Zelioses. And there's like basically no stem wobble, and they're great. They're reasonably priced. Like the U4Ts are like 60 cents a switch, and the U4s are like 65 cents a switch. So the pricing is there, the tactile feeling is there. You can get them in 62 grams or 68 grams. Both are great switches. S tier for me. Yeah, and housing are super tight, so that's great. You don't need to film them. You don't need to lube them unless you want a deeper sound. I guess you can lube them, but like they're a great stock switch. Gold standard for me. S tier. Oh yeah, let's do box royals. Easy D tier for me at the very last spot. These things were designed to be the most sharp P-shaped tactile switch there is. It's too much. I do not like typing on royals. Like I just feel like I'm slamming my fingers every time I try to type on this thing. So these are easy D tier for me. Nothing will ever improve these for me. No lubing, no filming, no anything. So D tier. You know what? Let's go ahead and talk about the black. I'm gonna put these as C tier for me. And some of y'all will probably hate me for this. Again, I prefer linear switches over tactile switches, which is why I'm putting the black jades, dark jade blacks, what they're called, dark jade blacks as C tier, because they were kind of advertised as a Holy Panda competitor, but they don't feel like Holy Pandas. Like Holy Pandas are more rounded. Jade blacks are just a very strong, intense downward bump and upward stroke. Yeah, take the Holy Panda feeling and like double that feeling, and like that's what you get with the J Blacks. It's like it's too intense for me, but if you try a Holy Panda Switch and you're like, oh man, I could really use like a more tactile switch, then yeah, you probably will like these J Blacks. I don't like them, they're too tactile, but I do like it more than Box Royals because Box Royals are just sharp, and I do not like that. Glorious Pandas. I was kind of talking mad trash about them before with the leaf ping. I'm putting them as B tier just because one, that tactile feeling is more what I like with that Holy Panda-ish tactile bump with the more roundedness of it. So I like that. Pricing is right at 70 cents a switch, so they're like the cheapest Holy Panda switch that you can get. But they are, I do find them to sound a bit higher pitched than drop Holy Pandas. The stem wobble is okay. The leaf ping is bad. Like, honestly, the leaf ping is pretty bad, but I don't think leaf ping is something that you really will notice if you're like using a keyboard, because like when you listen to a sound test, the microphone is like right next to the keyboard. You don't type like this, right? That's why sound tests are like kind of misleading. So when you're just like using Glorious Pandas, you're not really gonna hear that leaf ping, which is why I'm kind of like not caring too much about that, but it is there. But overall, B tier for me, because they're also like in stock like all the time, so you can always get them. So that's great. Kiwis. All right, yeah, let's do Kiwis. Kiwis for me are, double check, I'm pretty sure they're A tier. Yep, Kiwis for me, easy A tier. They're a T1 shaped like stem with the special key company housing, whatever housing that they use. It's a clean sound, so you don't really hear any leaf ping or spring crunch. So let's put the T1 on there too. I'll put these at T1's A tier, but right before the Kiwis. So the Kiwis are 65 cents a switch. The T1s are 55 cents. So the T1s are a bit cheaper, but I just like the Kiwis more. It's pretty minimal, but like I just like the Kiwis more. I find it to be like a bit smoother. I like the sound of Kiwis more. Feeling wise, they feel about the same. And pricing wise, they're roughly the same. But T1s are a lot easier to get than Kiwi switches. I believe the Kiwi switches on Key Company are now out of stock, but Prime KB seems to always have T1s in stock. So you can get the Kiwi switches. T1s are fine. I like Kiwis a tad more, but they're both great. Blueberries are, I had them as C tier for me, but like at the very end of the C tier, going close to D tier. Blueberries have like a 2-step tactile bump, which is kind of interesting, and the tactile bump is like more drawn out. It's kind of nice. I will say it is kind of nice. It's something different, but they are kind of scratchy like creams. I think they use the same housing at creams, I believe, so they're scratchy. There's definitely an audible ping on the upstroke, and the sock springs are like 80 grams, too heavy. So C tier, but like basically almost D tier on the blueberries for me. Dragon fruit, look wise S tier, switch wise B tier. The reason why they're B tier for me is because I appreciate that there's a switch out there now, a tactile switch that's not all about a strong tactile bump, because there are people who prefer a softer tactile bump like Ergo Clears, and that's what a Dragon Fruit switch was meant to be, kind of like an Ergo Clear competitor. So they're less tactile than like all of these other switches on this list right now. So if you wanted like a softer tactile feeling, Dragon Fruits are probably for you. But yeah, you can really hear the leaf ping as well on Dragon Fruit. And the stem wobble is like not fantastic, but stem wobble for me is like not a big deal. So I'm giving them a B tier, but like at the very end of the B tier, close to C tier. Zelos V2s, B tier, before Glorious Pandas, after the Dragon Fruit. One, again, Zelo switches are very expensive. These Zelos are $1 a switch. The tactile profile is a sharp tactile P-shaped bump, so that's the one I don't prefer. And just because of the price and the B-shaped bump for me, I'm putting them as B tier because it's like the tactile feeling of the T1s, Kiwis, Pandas, Bobas more. Just that more rounded feeling. And speaking of pandas, I might as well throw the drop pandas up there. I'm gonna put these at A tier, but at the very end of A tier. There's really not much to say about drop holy pandas. I feel like, I mean, like they're holy pandas. Everyone knows what holy pandas are. They have a nice round tactile bump, and the drop holy pandas are like the only way you can really easily get them these days, unless you want to go through the trouble of finding yoke housing and then buying the halo stems and doing it yourself. And if you rather do that, I think that's better than just buying the drop holy pandas. Because I think sometimes the drop holy panda can just have issues, so it could be better to just make it yourself out of yoke housing and the halo stems. But price wise they're about the same, so pretend that they're both represented here. I'm putting them as A tier. Holy pandas are a great switch. That's all I can say about that. Aqua Xylence, C tier. I'm debating where to put them here or here right now. You know what? Just because the Boba U4 exists, I'm putting them at the very last C tier. Sorry, Aqua Silent Switch. Zeal Switch, expensive, $1.2 a switch, US dollars. They were a great switch. Sorry, they were a great choice for a silent tactile switch, because the only option you really had was like the Xylence and like this one, the Aulas, whatever you say it. And these ones are just not great. So that's why your Xylence were like the only choice if you really want a silent tactile switch. But ever since the Boba U4s came out, these are just C tier for me. Like, I don't think you should even consider these just because the Boba U4s are out there. I will say the Xylence do have a sharper tactile feeling than the U4s, but I just like the more rounded bump of the U4s, and the U4 tactile bump is still pretty good. Like, I really like that feeling. So if you're considering Xylence, I think Boba U4s are just better, and I think you should just get Boba U4s. The last thing we have here is the Tactit by, I believe, Keybwork. These are a silent T1 tactile switch, and I'm putting a C tier, but above the Xylence. So they're Z1s, but they're T1s, but they're silent. So there's not much to say there, but they're not the quietest tactile switch. When I was trying them on my switch tester, I didn't realize they were a tactile switch, or sorry, I didn't realize that they were a silent switch. Like, they were still kind of noisy. Like, you hear that? Like, these silent tactile switch are noisy, especially when you compare it to the Bobas. So as a silent switch, they don't do a very good job at that. So C tier. Actually, I'm gonna put these like here, just because they're a bad silent switch. You know what? I'm gonna just do Clicky real quick, and I'm gonna do a small modification. That seems right to me. What do you guys think? Yeah, I don't like Clickies. They are I mean, I will say they are something satisfying about Clickies. They're just not great. Like, if I really had to rank these, I would do something like that. I don't know, dude. Like, I just don't care. I think I like Jades the best, I guess, box Jades, but like they're all just F tier for me. So hey, you know what? Let's do something fun. Let's do the Frankenstein switches. Sorry, let me start this. I do not think Frankenstein switches are worth it. Straight up. Like, for me, they're all F tier. But a lot of people really like Frankenstein switches because they're chasing endgame or whatever. I don't know. So I'm just gonna do it, and I'm gonna try to rank them fairly in terms of like other Frankenstein switches. For the most part, not necessarily other switches that you can buy, if that makes sense. Just because a lot of people just like making these, but I don't think any Frankenstein switches are really worth it. They're just kind of too expensive and kind of a waste for the most part. IMO. But Panazelios are definitely not worth it. This is a Zelios V2 stem in the Inver Panda housing. So they're deeper sounding than Zelios due to the Panda housing, because Zeal housing straight up don't sound that great. They're not as sharp of a tactile feeling as Zelios because you don't have that Zeal leaf anymore. You have a Panda leaf. So even though it's not as sharp, it rounds out that bump. But there's nothing special about the switch. I would rather just buy a Panda switch I don't know. I just didn't see a point in these, so D tier. So next, let's do MX Xylens. So I actually do have MX Xylens because when I built my EXE65, there was like no silent linear switch option out there, really, other than a cherry silent switch. And cherry silent switches are like fine, but the housing is not great because they weren't that smooth. So you wanted to have a smooth housing, you just put it in a Zeal housing and you get MX Xylens. So they are a great smooth silent switch, and the cherry silent stem is the rubber is smoother than the other silent switches, the silent alpacas, the silent black inks, the Helios, but they're C tier. I mean, like, I did tell you guys I was trying to compare it against other Frankenstein switches, but like I'd rather just get alpacas these days. Like if you want a silent linear switch, just get alpacas. I don't think there's really any reason to make MX Xylens anymore. But they're a silent linear switch, and silent switches are generally like not like a choice. It's because you have to for the most part. So C tier. Next up, let's talk about creamsicles. I'm putting this S tier. So creamsicles, the point of these is to get the deeper sound from the cream stem and the smoothness out of the tangerine housing. So this is a cream stem and a tangerine housing, but you also get a shorter travel distance because the cream stem is actually longer. So you're trading off a shorter switch travel distance in exchange for that deeper cream sound. If you like the less switch travel due to longer stem, then it's a win-win, right? Because then you get the shorter travel distance and then you get the deeper sound from the creams. And for me, I don't really care about the travel distance too much. Like if it's shorter, I personally don't really care too much. So in the end, this is for me a lot of benefit. It's smooth, and you can even like choose to swap out the top for like, I don't know, a cream top or a cherry top to just make it even deeper sounding, I guess. So these are a pretty good linear switch, but again, Frankenstein switches are expensive. These are like $1.30 a switch or something like that, but I mean they're nice, so S tier. And you get a nice colorway for a switch. That's true, they do look pretty damn nice. Go ahead and do Zycos. Zycos are S tier. I was skeptical, but after I tried them, these things are like $2 a switch. You need a Zeal housing, bottom housing, and you can also make them with Zeal springs. I don't like Zeal springs, so if you're making Zycos, just get different springs. Don't get Zeal springs. You have a panda top, and then you have a halo stem. That's like 3 different switches, right? That's insane. But the reason why I really do like Zycos is because they feel similar to Holy Pandas, but due to the Zeal housing, the Zeal leaves gives it a much firmer feeling. And I do get the appeal now. They feel tactile. They feel more tactile because of that Zeal leaf. But you still get that nice rounded bump from them. But then they're expensive. Like $2 a switch, like 3 different switches. I have heard they're hard to put together. I haven't heard why. Maybe because the leaf can be weird or something like that. But I guess they're S tier. I love Frankenstein switches. I would never make them, but if you want to go through the trouble of chasing endgame, S tier. Lastly, we have blueberries and T1s. Okay, these are interesting. So this is a blueberry stem in a T1 housing. First of all, you're going to have some trouble with these because the T1s only comes at the heaviest a 67-gram spring. And when you use a 67-gram spring with this blueberry stem, it actually sticks. Like when you press down, the stem will stick for a little bit and then go back up. There's just not enough like upward force of the spring to shoot this thing back up. Maybe because of the double tactile bump of the stem or whatever. So one, you just need a stronger spring. So you're gonna need blueberry switches, T1 switches, and aftermarket 70-gram springs or so. 2, even with a 70-gram spring, it was still kind of sticking. So I lubed it with 205G0. I lubed the leaves, and that helped. That basically got rid of like all of the sticking, and it really didn't affect the tactile film that much because holy crap, these things are tactile. Like it's kind of like flipping a light switch. Like it's a very sudden tactile feeling, and it's unique in that sense. Like I like it more than like the sharp tactile feeling of like Box Royals, Maybe because this one is just like, not only is it sharp, it's also like very strong. And it honestly feel like I'm just like flipping a light switch like up and down. These do feel interesting, but I don't think I would like typing on them because again, that is a very strong tactile bump. So if you are some kind of like tactile freak, these are the switches for you, I will say. But you will need a heavier spring, and you're going to need to loop these with 205G0 to make them work. Oh, I do have a big update for y'all. Okay, so I have officially signed up to be a Canon Keys affiliate. They are sending me a keyboard for a video. I can't tell you what it is yet because I don't believe it's been mentioned anywhere because I found no information anywhere. So I'm not gonna say anything, but they're sending me a keyboard soon, so I need to build that and make a video on that. So I have a Canon Keys keyboard coming in. I have an LCK75. I have the Sunsetter coming in. I also have the GMMK Pro. Crap, that's like 3 keyboards plus Canon Keys. That's 4 keyboards. Okay, I have a lot of keyboards coming in. All of these will not come out within a reasonable time frame of me getting them. I don't think, just because that's a lot of building and video creation. It takes a long time to make a video. I will probably stream at least, you know what? How about this? I'll stream the Sunsetter one just so I don't have to like think about a video for this because playing a video takes forever. So I'll stream the Sunsetter. LCK will just be like a video. The Canon Keys one will probably be a video. And the GMMK Pro will be, maybe I'll do a stream of first impressions, just like unboxing first impressions, knowing nothing about the keyboard other than the product listing, and then later on I'll make a video on the GMMK Pro. But I'm going to prioritize the GMMK Pro just because it's like the more hype keyboard, more accessible. In terms of priority, like it would be Canon Keys, GMMK Pro, and then I'll stream Sunsetter, and then LCK I'll just build. And that's like last priority just because you can't really buy that anymore, but it's open source. So if you want, you can just order all the parts yourself. That's what's coming in the pipeline. In terms of just keyboard videos, I'll also have other video ideas for like built keyboard buildings that I still need to work on. I have a lot of stuff and I haven't got around to it because of Valheim. Sorry. You know.